at NTV.
In our Kickstarter this Monday morning, as we journey on, we're going to be looking at governance and challenges in public service delivery 2023. If you pick yourself a copy of the Daily Monitor, you will find some intriguing stories that are towards public service. For example, on page 8, you do have experts wanting the education system to promote all-round learners. And then on pages 10 and 11 in regional news, they bring you stories about power blackouts crippling businesses in the eastern side of Uganda. Stakeholders wanting the anti-corruption court decentralized and the pain of getting PDM cash. All these are supposed to be efficient and effective for a good service to Ugandans, but later on for a lucrative economy. But is it? Well, public service delivery is one of the cardinal objectives of governance. Uganda faces crucial challenges in delivering inclusive infrastructure, quality health service delivery, sustainable education, employment, as well as housing, among many other things, due to governance issues. Now, state powers and economic resources are controlled by political elites and are being used as instruments of guaranteeing regime survival, one. The second one being maintaining political control over society. And for which society? It is Uganda. And as a consequence of this control over resources, the activities of Ugandan civil society and international agencies aimed at stimulating the demand for governance reform, sometimes rendered less effective and even outright ineffective. Extant literature shows that this experience replicates itself in other African countries. So it's not just Uganda alone. The question becomes, is it a syndrome in developing countries? Well, this discussion is going to be having Dr. Sarah Bireete, who is an analyst, and also Joseph Ochieno, who is upcoming president anytime soon, as far as his political career is concerned, to examine the governance issue, its challenges towards public service in Uganda as we close 2023. Good morning to you, Mr. President-to-be.
Good to be see you here, and I'm always delighted to be here. Yeah. And yes, we believe that this country can be better, and it will be better.
Okay. All right. Good morning to you, Dr. Sarah.
Good morning, Priscilla and viewers, and glad to be back on Morning at NTV.
Okay. Fattest question I ask both of you this morning is to help us analyze 2023 in terms of public service delivery. What have been the hits and the misses? I'll start with the lady.
Yeah, maybe for the benefit of the viewers, to underscore the fact that the main function of the executive is service delivery. The executive formulates policies, takes care of the MDS or government agencies engaged in implementation, does the budget, foreign relations, as well as effective functioning of the whole government machinery. So if you look at that key function and the budget that now comes into the year 2023 is hinged on Vision 2040, National Development Plan 3, and the Sustainable Development Goals. And the plan to have the budget rooted in NDP 3 was to make sure that the pillars of NDP 3 are integrated in government programming for implementation. And that's how we came up with a budget under programs as compared to individual institutions. So if you go to this program budget, we have key programs that should have empowered the citizenry from using the bottom-up approach, like the parish development model. We have other programs like infrastructure. And when you go under the capital development program, it has education, health, and all this bulk that is supposed now to create a global citizenry competitive enough to ensure that the aims and goals of National Development Plan 3 are achieved. So to what extent have we gone in terms of that? And I will refer to the annual report by the Equal Opportunities Commission. There have been several studies done, the Afrobarometer study, put at the downward trend in how Ugandans appreciate government and governance in general, because there is no value, and this has caused loss of trust and confidence. But if you go to the Equal Opportunities Commission report, and specifically from page 119, where they assess the human capital development sector in terms of health, education, the number of pupils through UPE, where we lose 50% of the pupils in UPE process, USE students loan scheme that is going into one region, and then you see that we have not made too much progress as envisaged in these programs of government.
That's interesting. Joseph, in regards to the very same, your assessment of governance in line with supporting service delivery, your analysis of 2023.
I don't know whether I should give an analysis or give a scorecard, because if I could give a scorecard, I would give 1 out of 10.
Why?
But it's always a delight to be with Sarah, and it's always a delight to let her lead in many of these conversations, of course, without prejudice. But quite frankly, the context given by Sarah from an analytical point of view, if I were to give half of it, they would say those are politicians and UPCs, and they would say so anyway. That basically is really the foundations. And you ask me why. It's primarily what Sarah said. So if you can't really, basically, as a government, sit and plan over a 5-year period. Okay. If you cannot sit as a government and plan over a 10-year period and deliver it, in fact, if you can't sit as a government and plan over 1-year period, a budgetary provisions, we had a conversation on this head with the when we were discussing these extra monies, what do they call them? The emergency budget things that, supplementaries that, continuously the executive goes for with the National Assembly, to the National Assembly. Tells you how short-sighted these guys are, but tells you actually that the governance of this country is so localized that it has now become a personal project rather than a national strategic program for a family as a nation state. Any average sensible family in Uganda, and it doesn't have to be an upper middle class, not even middle class family, any average peasantry family will have a conversation around what Sarah is saying. How much acres of land have we got? How many children have we got that go to school? How many of our children will possibly need uniform for next term, and how much food do we have? How much of the acreage are we able to use per month or per season to make sure that we've got guaranteed provision for cassava, maize, rice, or in this case a pot of bushel in a particular corner? No, as far as that is concerned, I've localized it. It is basically that the regime gets a one score, 1 for attempts, meaning that yes, you can go around aspects of the country and you see a semblance of road works taking place. Where I live, infrastructure. Road works that has taken 1 kilometer and has taken 8 months and it hasn't moved. And these are big global projects that include Chinese engineers and contractors. I've raised this up to, and including with the Minister for Transport at one stage. The progress of works has not gone beyond 1 mile. It is telling you about incompetence, it's telling you about lack of leadership, it is telling you about huge expand of corruption. But I can tell you, you see I'm rather sleepy. I'm just returning from the east this morning, and thanks for having me this morning. I was supposed to have arrived in Kampala much later today. But I came from fantastic events in Toro, but of course I also have some crucial family matters. But you see what is happening in Tororo, and you see what's happening in Bali. And on Friday morning, after I gave a press conference in Tororo over infrastructure, which I will talk about shortly, you go down the road, Sarah, and you see, as part of your own report, you see these young 13, 14, 15-year-olds trailing the streets in Molo, trailing the streets in Morkiswa, trailing the streets in Kisoko. And you see, these hundreds of children without a sense of direction, no guarantee that they're going to get quality primary living examinations results, no guarantee that they're going to qualify for O or A level, and no guarantee that even some of the handful that you might see that might actually qualify will in any way have a possibility of getting jobs. That can be anything near to any of the three of us sitting here. It's really about that. So I generally don't know. But since it's an introductory part of the conversation, the thing I was trying to tell you in Tororo, part of the ignorance of our population is so much that's very difficult actually for me to come here and give a fair analysis of the situation without politicizing it. And why? Because it's in politics anyway, because as Sarah says, it's the role of the executive. Interesting, when I was stuck in traffic this morning, I was thinking, is it the case that maybe these days they don't study or they don't teach civics? Instead they putender patriotism in the process? Because for me, as early part of my O-level, I understood the role of government in terms of provisions for health, provisions for education, provision for infrastructure, backing agricultural sector. And you know that there's a guaranteed elements of the parastatal organizations, including access to public housing. We don't talk about housing in this country. So in a very holistic way, talk about the environment. The fantastic conversation you and Chris have just been having here with your guests about the climate change and the environment. These are the contemporary conversations. That's why the young lady who was here must, and the gentleman, particularly the young lady, must be hailed, because it's their future that we're breaking in terms of environment. And the possibilities that they will find a region, and I don't know whether it was the introductory element where you talk about East Africa. Yeah, I think it was yours where you talk about Africa. No. Go to Rwanda, go to Kenya, merely neighboring countries. Go to Tanzania, which was sunk the other day. No. Africa generally is moving forward. Uganda is actually sinking.
All right. Do we have the sand to help it not sink thus far? It's another question. But Joseph has mentioned something that I believe as civil society you can speak into. The ignorance of population being very instrumental in what we are seeing today as the non-inclusive challenges that are faced within the different infrastructures and sectors that are meant to be having a good tendency in regards to extension of financing and regulating and implementation. So in regards to the ignorance of population, how has that aided what we have in Uganda today?
Well, the people have been deliberately kept in the dark, because when you look at the Constitution, the provisions of the Constitution mandate government to translate the Constitution into local languages, but also teach it at all levels. So was this done? We are talking of 28 years. I know that immediate after the enactment of the Constitution, there were a few translations. I later landed on copies in the office of the Prime Minister in Iteso, and a few, I think I got 2 languages. But were these copies distributed? Because I never saw them in my district. How many people have seen the translated Constitution of Uganda? So 28 years of failure to bring to take the Constitution back to the people alone explains why we have less informed and less active citizens. But citizens are also grappling with 2 other challenges. One of them is apathy. 80% of Ugandans in Afrobarometer report think that democracy has lost meaning in this country. But when you look at the elite, also absence of elite consensus contributes a lot to the degradation of democracy in this country. We have elite that are divided according to privilege or according to survival. And the elite have switched off from politics of the day, and they are not engaging. A democracy cannot thrive without active citizenry. The other 2 elements we need for democracy to thrive is effective institutions. The Equal Opportunities Commission Annual Report 2023 alone shows you the failures of institutions even to abide by the Constitution. And I'll use the example of the Gender and Equity Compliance Certificate. 22% of government institutions failed to meet 50% of the requirements for gender equity. 15% failed to qualify at all. So that shows you that even government institutions, even when we think Uganda has been leading in gender empowerment, look at what is happening with the institutions, because they are non-functional. When you look at the other crisis of youth unemployment, because 78% of our population are young people, but you have 80% of educated youth failing to find jobs. How do you then create an active citizenry that can engage and hold
when
leaders
Sarah
to
opens
account.
that kind of worms, you saying that educated youths failing to find jobs, it opens up a can of worms, because what level of education are we talking about? What standard of education we're talking about? We're talking about a system that is long overhauled in the developed countries versus the system that they have. So the competitiveness of employment is very, very difficult in such a time as this. But going back to something that she has mentioned, the Equal Opportunities Commission's report, the annual report, and how exactly it stated that so far most institutions, most MDS are failing to meet the bare minimum of standardization as far as effectiveness and inclusiveness is concerned. However, we cannot ignore the fact that even though they've not reached 50%, at least they're not at 1%, they've been having small strides towards getting to the bare minimum standardization, which we have to give credit to.
Absolutely unacceptable. Not in this day and age, and when you play around with the figures, that you even confuse our very kind viewers and watchers, because as a matter of fact, part of what Sarah says is extremely important, and is the question that you raised about this civic awareness, not about civic competence, but civic awareness. It's actually extraordinary. Let me tell you something. When I went to Tororo over the weekend on Friday, I gave a press conference, and I don't know whether your media, your network covered it, but it was on following a demonstration in Tororo over Nagonga Road that I've talked about here several times. Councillors were arrested and whisked off, and the demonstration dispersed. I got concerned and raised this matter. In talking to all the political leaders that I will not mention, including public servants, you know, it became very clear that, sir, even possibly senior police officers and senior judicial officers actually didn't know or don't know that demonstrations are a basic right. You know? And I got this from a very major political office and a political official who, I understand, they think that if you allow people in Morkeswa or Nagongera or that Toro, a terrible place, you know, demonstrate for bad roads, you will anger, you will annoy the person in the name of Comrade Museveni, for whom he doesn't really mind very much, because for him it's good tarmac roads that lead maybe even to his cattle dips, you know. Now, those are top public servants, top politicians. On average, the ordinary people just have no clue. So really, where we are at the moment, we just need a political overhaul in this country. Because I think the system and institutions that Sarah is talking about, if you have a constitution that took huge amount of money, huge amount of energy to enact, and it has now taken, it's now in its 30th year, and it hasn't been broken as it is, and actually some of its founding partners, participants, don't know, don't appreciate, and they're not willing to change it. That means there is no leadership, no political will, and we'll go around and around and around.
Okay.
Now, in the situation in which we have the vast majority of people who even get opportunity to get education, they can't make basic interpretations, and some of those can't get basic jobs, then why would you give 2%? Sure.
So we do have, you know, this part coming to a break, but one of the things that we can pick out is what is the power of civic education to a society, and the other thing that has been mentioned is a political overhaul. But the question that rises out of that, political overhaul versus system overhaul.
In TV.
All right, thank you so much for still being with us on our Kickstarter this morning as we look into the governance and its challenges in public service delivery, focusing on the year 2023. And so far, a heated debate it has raised with my guests here in studio. I do have Dr. Sarah Bireete, who is a political analyst and also speaks on behalf of Civic Society. Then you also do have Joseph Ochieno with UPC, and then so he has been painting for us really a good picture of governance as far as political eliteness is concerned. And it raised two questions. The first question was the power of civic education, which I turn to the doctor to give us an answer to.
Well, there are two common sayings. Knowledge is power, information is power. These sayings are alive. They are not cast in a myth. So when you empower citizenry, like our Article 1 says, all power belongs to the people, who shall exercise it in accordance with the Constitution. So when you deny people knowledge of the Constitution, it means that Article 1 is redundant. Because I know many leaders, for convenience, always stop at all power belongs to the people. They don't explain how that power belongs to the people. There are two key issues in Article 1. One is that the people must exercise their power in accordance with the Constitution. And they can only do that when they have knowledge, at least basic knowledge of the Constitution. The second key issue in Article 1 is that the people will then decide who should govern them in regular, free and fair, credible elections. That is the hard truth of Article 1. When you deny people information and knowledge of the Constitution and also deny them credible elections, then Article 1 collapses. And Article 1 is the spirit of the Constitution. It does not exist in this country because the people neither have knowledge of the Constitution and neither do they have the free and fair credible elections. So when you take away those two, and in the absence of information, we don't have a critical mass of people demanding for accountable leadership. We have increasing corruption every year. Last year, the Inspector General of Government put the money lost in this country at 10 trillion per year. That is 10%. No, that is a fifth of the budget, because we have a budget of 50 trillion. So when you lose 10 trillion to corruption, you are remaining with 40 trillion to implement. And we lose more money in procurement. We lose more money in, even if you look at the reports, how government ignores.
And if you don't mind, just a quick context, which 1/5, that 10 trillion, because corruption money by citizens and particular people in power, that part of money still goes on to undermine the process of whatever else the other remaining in the budget will do, because it's a failing system.
Oh, yes.
Yes, of course, corruption now undermines the other arms of government. It undermines the functioning of parliament. It undermines the functioning of judiciary. To some extent, people who have the means are able to access justice.
And so
people without the means
delayed justice
have even no remote connection to justice. So when you have this country, and that's why we have growing disparities. Again, I will draw you to the Equal Opportunities Commission report. For my think, that is the standard report that should help generate elite consensus on how this country should go forward.
So while it has done its job, unfortunately, if rationalization takes the center stage, Equal Opportunities Commission will be swallowed back into the system, so it won't be effective as it has been independent of the system. Turning to you, Joseph, political elites being used as instruments of guaranteeing regime continuity or, you know, taking over political control of society. It begs the question, should we have a political overhaul or should we simply look at a system overhaul?
It's a political overhaul, and interestingly, in the last 3 days, I received, amongst the many young people joining me and joining my campaigns in UPC, a young journalist, freelance journalist, without prejudice, you know, who actually invoked the idea of Jerry Rawlings, you know, and said that this country needs a bit of a Jerry Rawlings. This is a 27-year-old young, sharp guy, you know. This country needs a bit of a Jerry Rawlings, who will be able to not only shake the system, but shake both the political elite and the civic elite, basically the elite. Yes. You know, that is really, really revolutionary. So meaning, therefore, that when these guys come, you know, a good proportion of the population get hanged, a good proportion of the population go to Luzira, a good proportion of the population go to Morikatipe prison in Tororo, rather than ordinary people who are demanding for a road that UPC was supposed to be doing 35 years ago and has not been done today. You know, but of course, for us, UPC, you know, we believe in civility, and no, backing what Sarah's talked about, the civic responsibility. While there's an element of responsibility of the state, I take responsibility as the political elite, particularly political leaders. So political parties notwithstanding the fact that, of course, in many cases we are being kissed by force by NRA, including some section of UPC, you know, that political leaders should also contribute, that the more we engage with the citizens, and because actually some of my engagement is shocking how you meet young people and they don't know. How you meet young people and they don't know their roles and responsibilities. How once in a while I meet some of your colleagues and I blackmail them with their responsibilities. And you possibly see in their faces people genuinely say, come to think of it, I didn't actually see it that way. But most important, I didn't know it's my role. Part of what Sarah is trying to talk about, that in many cases people say that, well, we've given up, giving hope. No, it's the responsibility of those of us who know, and many of you guys who know and understand, to begin also to move from a position of being eaters and patronage experts to recognizing that the future of this country is beyond ourselves in the interest of our children and children's children. Okay. And so therefore, whatever, meaning basically detoxing politics of money, detoxing politics of patronage, surely there are people who've eaten big, part of this corruption thing, annually for 35 years. Surely can't you simply say that, well, it's enough, I've had it for 35 years, this is enough for me? No, I'm saying 35. Okay. In argument's sake, you know, individuals, or that average, you know. And maybe this is a bit strong for me and my children and children's children. We need to be able to start it enough. I have started a conversation with the political lead, and I really hope that once I reclaim my former office, I'll be able to have a conversation with political leaders across the political divide, including in NRM, to tell them that, look, citizens, the time is nigh to reclaim our nation, to reclaim the state, to reclaim the institutions, but also to reclaim our national body policy, so that for once, when our oils come and when our huge goals in Toro, by the we got gold that was going to turn around this country, come around, but we hope that no Balalo going to come to that. And by the way, Balalo leave northern Uganda, you know, leave actually a land alone. Some of you guys tortured them, but you know, leave their land alone, so that we claim all that is Uganda, to be able to begin to think as a part of the context of this conversation here, that we do governance that works, we do institutions that work, we do systems that work, and that everything else that we do are people and citizen-centered, like UPC did. Because we did these things before, most of these things, we did it before for the citizens of this country. Okay. There's no reason why, with the technology and the advance of systems that we've got today globally, we cannot do it better.
Unfortunately, we have to wait for 2026 for you to be given a chance to prove that you can do it again.
No, for my leadership, it's just about now.
Between now and 2026, Sarah, turning to you. How can civil society actually stimulate the demand for governance reform?
Well, we need two types of reform. One is the legal reform, but also the practice reforms. Actually, we need 100% practice reforms, and let me demonstrate this. Basic function of Electoral Commission. Electoral Commission is charged with a duty to print and protect electoral materials. In every election in this country, we have a saga of predict ballot votes. Why does Electoral Commission bangle their own elections? In whose interest do they act when they leak predict materials to vulgarize the sovereignty of the people to choose their leaders? You print materials, you give them out a day before to NRM people to rig elections. Electoral Commission should be held to account on why they vulgarize and abuse the sovereignty rights of Ugandans. The second issue is the army. The army has literally, in the last elections, the army conducted a coup against the people. You kill people. Just a few days ago, it made 3 years. When more than 54, I know government confirmed 54 deaths on Kampala streets. Other people put the deaths above 100. The army murdered people and police. No accountability today. Nobody has ever been arrested. The army created confusion all over the country, disrupting political rallies of opposition candidates. What is the army doing in our elections? They have staged a coup against the people. So those are the reforms we need. Get the army out of politics, get the Electoral Commission to account on why they bangle elections, and make sure we have normal elections. Then I know other things will go wrong, but let's first deal with these two.
In other words, Sarah is actually saying that we need formally both the political organization, civic society, the political citizens of this country, including learned good friends of ours, to actually put the Electoral Commission to task. And this is a campaign that actually should really be able to start. We should actually be able to start today. Starting it today is in the best interest of the citizens of this country. It actually serves the interest of some of these guys in the Electoral Commission, because some of these are people who really have a reputation to protect.
Okay, let's talk about governance and infrastructure development. Is it at the speed we should be having it? And the answer is no, but why is it a no?
Because they don't have any commitment.
Yeah, now a pothole comes.
We are a pothole republic. We've been promised on this program. I told you, Priscilla, I told you that we had been promised that Kampala roads are going to be cemented by some army guys, and I told you no. I don't know, unless cow dung comes,
but
you know, it will not happen.
What do you make of the president's, supervision over the works that are currently happening? Of course, in relation to NAM, it's disappointing that a whole head of state has to actually do the monitoring and evaluation of works that already have ministries or departments or authorities that are directly
is he saying that he was sleeping for Kampala to deteriorate to this level?
That he was busy commissioning boreholes.
And then he let potholes take over the capital city.
Yes.
Let me say this, I've traveled to more than 100 countries globally. I've never seen a capital city as ugly as Kampala in terms of absence of roads. Not even Central African Republic that has been under war will you find roads like this in the city. So how did we get to this point? And should the president only be seen to care when we are going to host an international meeting? He doesn't care about citizens, 5 million people who use these roads on a daily basis, whose cars are destroyed.
Yeah, he cared and gave the job to UPDF to be able to do the maintenance and repair works on the roads.
I think for me, actually for me, I think the state of service delivery in this country is evidenced in the mess in Kampala City, because this is the eye of Uganda.
Indeed, and in other words, I told you the young journalist said it right, that maybe this country needs a Jerry Rawlings, but I'm saying that this country basically needs an overhaul. Mr. Museveni is tired. This regime is tired. Museveni is tired. The bulk of his men and a few women are tired. But most importantly, when Museveni came to power, UPC told you, this guy had got no clue about governance, so he stumbled onto power. But number two, Museveni never had an interest in this country. Museveni never had an interest in this country, because if Museveni ever had an interest in this country, check what Kagame is attempting to do in Rwanda. Museveni had no interest in this country. Museveni has been the biggest national disaster. But anyway, anybody that has followed where we came from 1986, you see what NRA found and what is broken. No, I think that we should talk the future. Talking the future is that Ugandans need to wake up as part of the other conversations have taken place. We need to challenge these systems and institutions, and we need to challenge them together. I think we need to be able to rally around ourselves towards a national conversation, for a national dialogue, national consensus, possibly national reconciliation. We need leadership to emerge out of this country, political leadership particularly, but also civic leadership to emerge. But political leadership that emerges, that is able to bring consensus, so that we create a possibility for the people of this country to reclaim this country, and through that we have an election that takes place where leaders emerge who have got a genuine mandate of the citizens at the executive level, at municipal level, meaning council levels, and indeed at the parliamentary level. And so from then, people then will be able to take on the mess that NRA has created and rebuild this country the way UPC did before. And on the basis of the UPC structure, because most of us, UPC, any political party, I'm just giving you guys, just pick what we did, what UPC did, in the unlikely event that you govern and we don't govern. In the sensible political party interested in the country, just pick our books and run with it, and you will be 10 times better than what NRA has done in 40 years. You'll do it in 5 years.
Sarah, he speaks of the future, and the future has e-governance, in which you do have, the ICT taking center of service delivery. Now, that will, I believe, ensure effectiveness and efficiency. However, it will also sort out some of the things that you mentioned as far as elections are concerned, the discrepancies that came through elections. So when it comes to e-governance and public service delivery, for Uganda's perspective, is there a future for it in one, ensuring service delivery, effective service delivery to the people, and also managing things that you mentioned earlier, like corruption?
Ideally, e-governance would improve service delivery, because when you reduce people-to-people interaction, for example, in procurement, in service delivery where there are bribes and kickbacks, and people are interacting with machines, yes, it phases out to a bigger extent some of the challenges that we have discussed. But e-governance works with effective leadership. You know, machines do not operate themselves. They are operated by people. Let me give an example of CCTV coverage, which is effective in Kampala.
When you speak about CCTV, it's passing one of the most recently done roads in Lunguja. The cameras there's no lighting on the camera. So I'm thinking, what are they capturing and seeing when there's no lighting on it?
They're picking darkness. That's where these guys have taken
Right?
it.
Yes, but there are
Yes.
two instances of where people have been murdered. One is Rita Nabu Kenya, a support of Honorable Chagrani, who was murdered, I think, around Nakawa. And people said there is a CCTV point there. Give us the footage. It was deleted from the central CCTV, and it has never appeared. So CCTV coverage in Kampala has not helped to protect human rights of Ugandans. That's why I'm saying that it requires leadership. Without leadership, with the current leadership, e-governance will not work for the benefit of the people.
Okay, all right.
You know what? Interestingly, I think people then will just be able to hide beyond the screens, like UPC elections, which they decide we're going to do via Zoom because they think nobody's going to box the other. Sarah said, you can't do e-government without infrastructure. You can't do e-government when power gets cut off, like I'm seeing from the... You can't do e-government when nobody is governance, when nobody's regulating telecommunications companies. So that means...
And where you have people that will manipulate
precisely,
the system.
precisely. So, but that's ideal, but that's how urgent it is. And remember, you kindly hosted me here on infrastructure. I think the two of us actually were kind. I think 2-3 years ago on the question of infrastructure. That is much more urgent today than it was then. And infrastructure in a holistic way, because guys think infrastructure is roads and cow dung. No, infrastructure is roads, rails, networks, and including technology.
Well, you could think that this conversation is for the political elite or civic society, but no, it also engages you, because at the end of the day, you should be the end beneficiary. So you should be asking yourself, how does this conversation add value to me? It's simply pointing you in the direction where your power is, as our audience this morning, and your power lies in knowledge and information. Do you know your constitutional rights? Do you know your constitutional benefits, and how you should actually advocate for them and claim for them and receive them for that effectiveness and efficiency that we are talking about here this morning? Well, the power lies in documentation. You do have a constitution. If you can get your hands on it, get to read about it and know your rights, so that you can fight for your rights. After all, the power is to the people. That brings us to the end of our Morning at NTV program here on Monday's edition. Thank you so much for having been with us, and we trust that you have walked